My name is Claire Danielle Whitmore. I am 27 years old. And on the morning of March 14, 2024, I stood inside the cardiac intensive care unit of Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. In my white coat, my name badge clipped above my left pocket, holding a patient chart in my hands. Room 4114. I had been a surgical resident for 14 months. I had held hundreds of charts. I had stood in that hallway more times than I could count. But I had never held this chart before. The name on the tab read, Gerald Allen Whitmore. Age 54. Admitted March 13th. Acute myocardial infarction. Gerald Allen Whitmore. My father. The man who had driven away from the front steps of Mercy House Children's Home in Rockford, Illinois on a cold Tuesday morning in February 2006, and never once looked back. I stood there in that hallway for exactly 31 seconds. I counted them. Then I straightened my coat, adjusted my badge, and walked through the door. But before I tell you what happened in that room, I need to take you back to the beginning. To a little girl with a blue suitcase and a borrowed winter coat who stood on a sidewalk in the February cold and watched her entire world drive away. Because you cannot understand that hospital room without understanding that sidewalk. And you cannot understand that sidewalk without understanding everything that happened in between. I was born on September 3, 1996 in Rockford, Illinois. My parents were Gerald and Patricia Whitmore. My father worked in logistics for a freight company on the east side of town. My mother did bookkeeping from home. We lived in a beige split-level house on Carver Street. 3 bedrooms, a backyard with a broken bird bath, and a kitchen that always smelled like burnt coffee. To anyone driving past, we looked like a normal family. I was 9 years old when I learned that normal was just a performance some families put on for the neighbors. The fighting started when I was 7. I remember lying in bed listening to the walls shake. I did not understand all the words then. I understood the tone. I understood the silences that followed. The kind of silence that feels louder than anything that came before it. By the time I was 8, my father had stopped coming home some nights. My mother started keeping the blinds closed. My older brother, Marcus, who was 14 then, started spending most of his time at a friend's house 3 blocks over. He was always good at disappearing when things got hard. That was something I would not fully understand until much later. I was 9, and I did not know how to disappear. On February 8, 2006, I came home from school to find 2 suitcases sitting by the front door. One was mine, the blue one with the broken zipper pull that my grandmother had given me the Christmas before. The other was my mother's. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table. She was not crying. She looked like someone who had already done all her crying and was now just tired. "Sit down, Claire Bear," she said. I sat down. She told me that she and my father were separating, that things had been very hard, that sometimes adults make decisions that are very painful, but that they believe are the right ones. I asked her where I was going to live. She looked at the table. "You're going to stay somewhere safe for a while," she said. "Somewhere with other kids, until we get things sorted out." I asked if Marcus was coming too. She shook her head. "Marcus is going to stay with your Uncle Dennis for now." I remember thinking, why does Marcus get Uncle Dennis and I get somewhere with other kids? I did not say that out loud. At 4:15 that afternoon, my father pulled up in his silver Dodge pickup. He carried my blue suitcase to the truck without saying anything. My mother hugged me for a long time in the doorway. Long enough that I thought maybe she had changed her mind. She hadn't. I climbed into the back seat of the truck. We drove for 42 minutes. Counted the stoplights. 14. My father pulled up in front of a large red brick building on Meridian Avenue. There was a wooden sign above the door that read, Mercy House Children's Home, Key 1974. He turned around in his seat. His hands were still on the steering wheel. "This is a good place," he said. "They'll take good care of you." I asked him when they were coming back for me. He said, "Soon." He said soon. I did not know then that soon is the word adults use when they mean never but cannot bring themselves to say it. I got out of the truck. I carried my blue suitcase up the front steps. I heard the truck engine behind me. I did not turn around. I don't know why. Some part of me, even at 9 years old, already knew that if I turned around and watched him drive away, something inside me would break in a way that would be very hard to put back together. So I kept walking. I pushed open the front door of Mercy House. And that was the last time I was inside a home with my last name on anything. For 8 years. But here is the thing I didn't know that day. The thing that would not make sense to me for a very long time. Before I reached the front door, an older woman came down the front steps to greet me. She had silver hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked at the blue suitcase. She looked at my face. She said, "You must be Claire." I nodded. She said, "My name is Dorothy Hale. I run this place. And I want you to know something on your very first day." I looked up at her. "Whatever they told you about yourself on the way here," she said quietly, "is not the whole truth." I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. But she pressed something into my coat pocket before she led me inside. A small white envelope. With my name written on the front in blue ink. She told me not to open it until I was ready. I kept that envelope for 9 years before I understood what she meant by ready. Mercy House had 23 children when I arrived in February 2006. I became number 24. I was given a bed in room 7, 3rd floor, east wing. I had a small dresser, a window that looked out over the parking lot, and a roommate named Becca who was 11 and had been there for 2 years and who told me on the very first night, "Don't wait for them. The ones who wait the longest get hurt the most." Becca was 11 years old and already wise in the way that only hard things make you wise. I didn't listen to her right away. For the first 3 months, every time I heard a car pull into the parking lot at Mercy House, I would go to the window. Every single time. I'd press my face against the glass and look for a silver Dodge pickup. It never came. By month 4, I stopped going to the window. Mrs. Dorothy Hale, Miss Dorothy we called her, ran Mercy House with a kind of calm steadiness that I didn't have a word for at 9 years old. She was firm about rules and gentle about everything else. She remembered everyone's birthday without a calendar. She kept a jar of peppermint candies on her desk and always offered you one before difficult conversations. She became, quietly, the most important person in my childhood. She noticed things about me that I didn't notice about myself yet. She noticed that I liked to read, that I was good at math, that I stayed up late with a flashlight reading science books I'd pulled from the common room shelf. When I was 11, she enrolled me in an after-school science program at Roosevelt Middle School. She drove me there herself every Tuesday and Thursday. She never once made it feel like charity. That is a very specific kind of kindness. The kind that doesn't announce itself. I was 12 years old when I first said out loud that I wanted to be a doctor. I said it to Miss Dorothy, sitting in her office with a peppermint candy in my cheek, after I'd read an article about pediatric surgery in a magazine she'd left in the waiting area. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Then that is exactly what you will do." I said, "Kids from places like this don't become doctors." She didn't flinch. "Tell me the name of one rule," she said, "that says that." I couldn't. "Then that rule doesn't exist," she said. "So stop following it." I kept that conversation in a part of my mind I returned to. Especially in the years that followed. Especially when other people were not so kind about it. My 7th grade science teacher, Mr. Hartley, handed back a test I had scored 98 on and said in front of the class, "Don't get too excited, Claire. Standardized tests are one thing. The real world is another." I said nothing. I went home and read 2 chapters ahead in the textbook. My freshman year of high school, a guidance counselor at Pemberton High School, her name was Ms. Vickers and I have never forgotten her, looked at my list of college interests and said with a kind of exhausted patience, "Pre-med is a very long road, Claire. And very expensive. Have you thought about something more practical?" I looked at her. I said, "Yes. I think about it every day. And then I keep studying." She blinked. I left her office. I went to the library and applied for 3 scholarships before dinner. I was angry, yes. But I learned very early that anger spent on people who underestimate you is anger wasted. Anger spent on studying, on preparing, on becoming, that is anger with a return on investment. Miss Dorothy told me that when I was 13 and I came home from school shaking after a classmate had said something about orphans at the lunch table. "Feel it," she told me, "and then redirect it. Anger is fuel, Claire. It's just a question of what engine you put it in." I put it in every engine I had. Before I continue, if you have ever been told that where you came from decides where you can go, if you know what it feels like to sit in a room full of people who belong somewhere and feel completely invisible, drop the word roots in the comments below. I read every single one. Because this story is not just about me. It's about every person who had to build themselves from the ground up when the people who were supposed to lay the foundation just left. Subscribe to Orphan Origins if this is hitting something real in you. Because we are barely past the beginning, and this story is about to go somewhere you are not expecting. I aged out of Mercy House on September 3, 2014, my 18th birthday. Miss Dorothy made me a chocolate cake with white frosting. She invited the other kids from the house. She gave me a card with a $100 bill folded inside and a note that read, "You were always going to be remarkable. Now go prove it to the world. Dorothy." I stood in the parking lot of Mercy House at 9 a.m. with my blue suitcase, the same one from February 2006, and a backpack with everything else I owned. I had a full academic scholarship to the University of Illinois at Chicago. I had been accepted into their pre-medical honors program. I had a part-time job lined up at a coffee shop on West Madison Street, starting the following Monday. I had worked for this for 6 years. I cried in the parking lot. Not from sadness exactly. From something bigger than sadness. Something that didn't have a clean name. My first apartment was a studio on the 4th floor of a building on South Halsted Street. $680 a month. I slept on a futon from a thrift store on Milwaukee Avenue. I cooked on a 2-burner stove. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. every morning and studied until class started. I worked at the coffee shop 22 hours a week. I maintained a 3.94 GPA. I won the Hollingsworth pre-medical scholarship in my sophomore year, $12,000 renewable annually. I remember standing at the lectern in Daly Hall to accept it. The audience was full of families, parents with cameras, fathers in blazers. I smiled at the crowd. There was no one in the audience who knew my name before that day. I kept smiling. I got used to that kind of alone. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind you carry inside formal rooms while everyone around you is being hugged. But I kept going. I applied to medical school during my senior year. I was accepted to Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine in March 2018. I sat on the floor of my studio apartment and read the acceptance letter 3 times. Then I called Miss Dorothy. She answered on the second ring. I said, "Miss Dorothy." I got in. There was a pause. Then she made a sound I had never heard from her before. Something between a laugh and a sob. Said, "I know you did, sweetheart. I always knew." I did not call my mother. I did not call my father. I did not call my brother Marcus. I had not spoken to any of them in 9 years. Not because I hadn't thought about it. I had thought about it more times than I could count. Late nights in the library. The first time I fainted from exhaustion in the hospital simulation lab and lay there on the floor for a moment wondering if there was anyone I could call. I had thought about calling, but I did not know what I would say. And I was not yet ready to find out what they would say back. So I kept building. Medical school was the hardest 4 years of my life. Not because of the material, though the material was relentless, but because of the sustained loneliness of building something massive with no one watching. Every other student seemed to have a person, a parent checking in, a sibling texting, someone whose voice reminded them that they were attached to something larger than themselves. I had Miss Dorothy. I had her letters. She still wrote letters on actual stationery in blue ink, and her phone calls every Sunday at 7 p.m. It was enough. It had to be enough. I matched into my surgical residency at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in January 2023. Cardiothoracic surgery. One of the most competitive specialties in American medicine. I remember the moment I saw my name on the match list. Dr. Claire Danielle Whitmore. Cardiothoracic surgery. Northwestern Memorial. I was 26 years old. I stood in the hallway outside the match office on a Thursday afternoon in January, and I let myself have exactly 40 seconds of pure, unguarded joy. 40 seconds. Then I straightened my coat. Because I knew there was still work to do. But 3 weeks after I started my residency, 3 weeks after I first put on my white coat with my name on the badge, I received a phone call from a number I did not recognize. A 779 area code. Rockford. I stared at the screen for a long time. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. The call came at 7:18 p.m. on a Tuesday in February 2023. I had just come off a 12-hour shift. I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking structure, still in my scrubs, eating a granola bar and listening to the silence. The phone buzzed. 779 area code. No name. I answered. Hello. A woman's voice. Older. Slightly out of breath. Claire? Claire Whitmore. I said, yes. Who is this? Pause. It's your Aunt Linda. Linda Bauer. My mother's older sister. I had met her maybe 4 or 5 times as a child. A thin woman with dyed red hair and a habit of agreeing with whoever was in the room. I had no strong memory of her being cruel to me. I also had no memory of her ever trying to stop what happened. I said nothing. She said, "I'm sorry to call like this." Out of nowhere. "I got your number from..." She paused. "It doesn't matter how I got it. Claire, your father is sick." "I know," I said. She stopped. You know. I'm a surgical resident at Northwestern Memorial, Aunt Linda. His chart crossed my desk this morning." Silence. "Oh," she finally said. "Oh, Claire." I waited. "Then you know it's serious," she said. "I know what the chart says." Another pause. Longer this time. Then she said something that changed everything. "Claire, there's something else. Something that has nothing to do with his heart. Something that happened the night they left you. Something your mother finally told me last year and I've been trying to figure out how to..." She stopped herself. "I think you need to know the truth about why they really gave you up." I gripped the steering wheel. The parking structure was empty. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. "What truth?" I said. She said, "Not on the phone. Can we meet?" I said, "Tell me one thing right now. Just one." A long pause. Then she said, "It wasn't about money, Claire. It was never about money. Someone made a decision for you that night that you never agreed to. And your parents let it happen because they were afraid." I sat in that car for a long time after we hung up. The granola bar sat unopened in my hand. 18 years of a story I thought I knew, and now there was a version underneath it I had never seen. And someone had been sitting on it for 18 years. I met Aunt Linda 4 days later at a diner called Edna's Table on West Chicago Avenue. She was already there when I arrived. Sitting in a corner booth, a cup of coffee going cold in front of her. She looked older than I remembered. Smaller. Like a woman carrying something heavy she no longer had the strength to carry alone. I sat down across from her. I did not hug her. She noticed. She didn't comment on it. She said, "Thank you for coming." I said, "Tell me what you know." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Took a breath. "When you were 9, she said, your parents weren't just separating. Your father had gotten into serious financial trouble. A bad investment. A business deal that fell apart. He owed money to people he shouldn't have borrowed from. And your mother was trying to manage the whole thing quietly. Selling things. Moving money." I said, "I know things were bad financially." She shook her head. "That's not the part you don't know." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table. It was a photocopy. Faded at the edges. The heading read, "Whitmore Family Trust. Amendment B. Dated January 14, 2006. 3 weeks before they dropped me at Mercy House." I looked at the document. My grandmother's name was at the top. Eleanor Whitmore. My father's mother. She had died in 2004, 2 years before I was left at Mercy House. The document was a trust amendment, and my name was the only name in it. I read it twice. Then I looked up at Aunt Linda. "What is this?" I said. She said, "Your grandmother left everything to you, Claire. Just you. Not your father, not your brother Marcus. Specifically to you. She changed the trust 6 months before she died. Her attorney held it in escrow until you turned 25. I said, "I turned 25 in 2021. She nodded. "Did anyone tell me?" She looked at the table. "Your father was the named trustee. He was supposed to notify you. He didn't." The diner was very loud suddenly. A coffee machine. Someone laughing near the window. A child in the next booth. I sat very still. "How much?" I said. Linda looked up. "The estate was valued at $340,000 in 2004, she said. With interest and market appreciation, the attorney I spoke to thinks it's somewhere around $490,000 now. Maybe more." I breathed in slowly through my nose. I breathed out. "Does my father know I know?" I said. She shook her head. "Does my mother know where I am? What I do?" She hesitated. "Your mother has known for about 2 years, she said quietly. "She drives past Northwestern Memorial sometimes. I don't think she ever goes in." I looked out the diner window at the Chicago street. Gray February sky. Bare trees along the median. I thought about a little girl on a February sidewalk with a blue suitcase. I thought about my grandmother's envelope, still sealed for 9 years in my Mercy House dresser drawer. And suddenly, like a key turning in a lock that had been frozen for almost 2 decades, I understood. Miss Dorothy had handed me that envelope on my first day, and she had known my grandmother. I drove to Rockford that Saturday. Miss Dorothy was retired now. She lived in a small house on Elm Street, 3 blocks from where Mercy House had been before it closed in 2019. She opened the door before I even knocked. She looked at my face and said, "You found out." I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She stepped back and let me inside. We sat at her kitchen table, the same peppermint candy jar on the counter, and she told me the truth she had been holding for 18 years. She had known my grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore. They had been in the same church choir for 11 years. When Eleanor changed her trust and named me as sole beneficiary, she had told Dorothy. She had told Dorothy because she was afraid. Afraid that Gerald and Patricia might try to keep Claire from ever knowing. He had not trusted them. And so Eleanor had written a letter. Sealed it in a white envelope. Given it to Dorothy with one instruction. Give this to Claire on the day she arrives. Tell her to open it when she is ready. I reached into my coat. I placed the envelope on Miss Dorothy's kitchen table. Still sealed. After all these years. Miss Dorothy's eyes filled. "You never opened it," she said. "I wasn't ready," I said. "Until now." I opened it at her kitchen table under the yellow light with my hands completely steady. My grandmother's handwriting was small and even and elegant. "My darling Claire, if you are reading this, it means what I feared has come to pass. I want you to know that I saw you. Always saw you. You are the one who has your grandfather's eyes and your grandmother's stubbornness. I have made arrangements to make sure you are provided for. The attorney's name is James Hargrove. His office is at 210 North Michigan Avenue, Suite 400, Chicago. He has been waiting for you. Everything I have is yours. Not because I didn't love your father, but because I knew, in the way a grandmother knows, that you were the one who was going to need it most. Don't spend it all at once. Don't let them make you feel guilty. And don't give back what was always meant to be yours. With all my love, Grandma Eleanor." August 2003. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully. Put it back in the envelope. Put the envelope in my coat pocket. And I sat at Miss Dorothy's table for a long time without saying anything. She made tea. He put a peppermint candy next to my cup. And finally I said, "My father was supposed to tell me when I turned 25. She said, "Yes." "He didn't." "No. He kept it." She said nothing. "Did he use it?" I said, "I don't know," she said. "That is what the attorney will tell you." I looked at my tea. "He's in my hospital," I said. "His heart." She looked at me. I said, "I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do." She said, "You will know when the time comes. You always have." I met with James Hargrove SQ at his office on North Michigan Avenue on a Wednesday morning in March 2024. Suite 400. Dark wood paneling. A view of Lake Michigan through floor-to-ceiling windows. He was a tall man in his late 60s with white hair and the careful manner of someone who had spent 40 years delivering news that changed people's lives. He had been waiting for me for 3 years. He said, "Dr. Whitmore, I'm glad you found your way here." I said, "My father was supposed to send me to you when I turned 25. He said, "Yes." "Did he contact you?" "He did," Mr. Hargrove said. He folded his hands on the desk. "In October 2021, he told me that you were unreachable, that he had made every effort to locate you and could not." I looked at him. "I have been a student or resident at Northwestern for the past 10 years, I said. "With a published directory listing." Mr. Hargrove said nothing. His expression said everything. "He knew," I said. "The trust is entirely intact," Mr. Hargrove said. "Your grandmother's funds were held in a restricted escrow account that your father could not access. The current value as of last month is $512,400. He slid a document across the desk. I looked at the number. $512,000. Sitting in an account with my name on it. For 3 years. While I was eating granola bars in hospital parking garages and splitting shifts at a coffee shop and sleeping on a thrift store futon and building myself from nothing because I believed I had nothing. I sat with that for a moment. Then I picked up the pen he had placed on top of the document. And I signed my name, Dr. Claire Danielle Whitmore. As I left the building, I stood on North Michigan Avenue in the March wind and looked out at the lake. Thought about my father, lying in room 4114 of my hospital. His heart failing. His chart in my hands. I had not gone back into his room since the morning I'd recognized his name. I had recused myself from his care, ethically required and the right thing to do. His cardiothoracic team was excellent. He was in the right hands. But there was a conversation that still had not happened. And I could feel it coming toward me the way you feel a storm coming. In the air pressure. In the stillness. If you're still here and I know you are, type truth in the comments right now. Because what just happened in that attorney's office? That is the moment I realized the abandonment was never the whole story. The abandonment was just the part they showed me. The rest, the trust, the letter, the silence, that was the part they kept in the dark for 18 years. Subscribe to Orphan Origins. Every story on this channel is about the version of the truth that the people who left us hoped we'd never find. We find it anyway. My mother called me on March 11, 2024. 3 days before the morning in the hallway with my father's chart. Her number had not changed. I still had it. I had just never dialed it. It was 6:44 a.m. I was getting ready for a shift. Claire, she said. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. Like a version of itself that had been worn down by years of something I hadn't witnessed. Patricia, I said. Pause. You know about your father. I'm a resident at Northwestern, I said. So yes. Are you treating him? No. I recused myself. His care team is excellent. A long pause. Then she said, Claire, I need to say something. I've needed to say this for a very long time. I waited. What we did to you was wrong, she said. I have known that for 18 years. And I was not brave enough to. Her voice broke. I listened. I did not fill the silence. We made a terrible choice, she said. I made a terrible choice. I told myself it was temporary, that it was just until things settled down. But things didn't settle. And then so much time had passed and I didn't know how to come back from it. I said, did you know about Grandma Eleanor's trust? Silence. A very long silence. Yes, she finally said. I found out later. Years later. When your father finally told me. And I told him he needed to contact you, she said. I told him every year since 2021. He kept saying he would. He didn't, I said. No, she said. He didn't. I sat down on the edge of my bed. The morning light was coming through the blinds in thin strips. Patricia, I said. I'm not going to tell you this doesn't matter. Because it does. What you did changed the shape of my entire life. I've had to build every single thing I have by myself. Every achievement. Every scholarship. Every hard night in a hospital. None of it had your name on it. None of it. He was crying now. I know, she said. I know. But, I said, I don't want to spend the rest of my life carrying this. I have carried it long enough. She stopped crying for a moment. What I am willing to give you, I said, is a conversation. A real one. In person. Not forgiveness yet, that takes time. But a conversation. She said, yes. Whatever you want. I said, when my father is stable enough for visitors outside his immediate care team, I will come to the room. Not as his surgeon. As his daughter. But I need something from you first. Anything, she said. Tell Marcus, I said. Tell my brother that I know about the trust. And tell him I want to see him too. Because I have a feeling he knew more than he ever told me. And I want to give him the chance to be honest before I have to be honest for him. The line was very quiet. He did know, she said very softly. He's known since 2021. I closed my eyes. Of course he had. Tell him, I said. And Patricia, one more thing. Yes. I am not the 9-year-old girl with the blue suitcase anymore, I said. So when we are in that room together, I need everyone to understand who they are actually talking to. Can you do that? Pause. Yes, she said. We can do that. March 14, 2024. 7:52 a.m. I had already been in the building for 2 hours when I picked up my father's chart again. Not because I needed to review his care, his team was managing it. I picked it up because I needed to hold it for a moment before I walked through that door. I needed to feel the weight of it. Gerald Allen Whitmore. Age 54. The same hands that had carried a blue suitcase to a truck and driven it to Mercy House Children's Home were now lying in a hospital bed with 4 lines in them. I put the chart back in its slot. I straightened my coat. I walked to room 4114 and pushed open the door. My father was propped up slightly in the bed. He looked smaller than I remembered. The freight company logistics man who had once seemed so large to me. The man whose silences had filled entire rooms. He was small now. My mother was sitting in the chair by the window. She was wearing a gray cardigan. She looked up when I came in. Her eyes filled immediately. My brother Marcus was standing by the far wall. He was 30 now. He had my father's jaw and my mother's eyes. He was wearing a dark green jacket and looking at the floor. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then my father looked at my badge. He read it slowly. Dr. Claire D. Whitmore. Cardiothoracic surgery. Northwestern Memorial Hospital. His jaw worked. He read it again. Claire, he said. His voice was rough from the oxygen tube. I said, "Hi, Dad." It was the first time I had said that word in 18 years. It sat in the room like something fragile. My mother pressed her hand over her mouth. Marcus finally looked up from the floor. I walked to the foot of the bed. I stood there. Calm. Steady. The way Miss Dorothy had taught me to stand in difficult rooms. With my weight even on both feet and my chin level and my hands still. "I'm not here as your surgeon," I said. "Your care team is excellent. You're in good hands. I'm here as your daughter." My father's eyes were wet. "I know about Grandma Eleanor's trust," I said. "I've already met with Mr. Hargrove. The estate has been transferred." He closed his eyes. "I'm not here to punish you," I said. "I want you to hear that clearly. I am not here to punish you. I am here because you are sick and because whatever happened between us, you are still my father. That is a biological fact. And I was not raised to walk away from facts." He opened his eyes. "I was raised, actually," I said, "by a woman named Dorothy Hale who taught me that the way you treat people in their worst moments says everything about who you are. And I would like to believe I learned that lesson." Marcus made a sound. Something between a breath and a word. I looked at him. "Marcus," I said quietly, "you knew about the trust." He said nothing. "I'm not angry at you," I said. I'm sad. Because we were siblings. And you chose silence. And that costs something. It costs trust and it costs time and you can't get time back." He looked at me. "I'm sorry," he said. The words came out like something that had been held under pressure for a very long time. "I know," I said. "I believe you." I looked at my mother. She was still crying. "Patricia," I said. "Thank you for calling me." She nodded, unable to speak. I turned back to my father. He was looking at me with an expression I didn't have a word for. Not just guilt. Something older than guilt. Something that looked like a man seeing very clearly the cost of the choices he had made over 18 years. He said, "I don't know how to ask you to forgive me." I said, "You just did." The room was very quiet. The monitors beeped softly. Somewhere down the hall a cart rolled by. And then, for the first time since February 8, 2006, I sat down in a chair in the same room as my father. Not at a children's home. Not in a truck. In a hospital room, in a hospital where my name was on the badge, in a city I had built myself into from nothing. I sat down. And we began. The weeks that followed were not a movie. There was no single scene where everyone cried and forgave and everything was resolved in a golden afternoon. That is not how it works. That is not how it should work. What happened was slower. More complicated. More real. My father spent 11 more days in Northwestern Memorial. He was discharged on March 25th with a care plan and a follow-up schedule. His cardiologist, a woman named Dr. Ananya Singh, someone I deeply respect, told me privately that he had been lucky. That another 12 hours without intervention and the outcome would have been very different. I thought about that. 12 hours. I visited him twice more during his stay. Both times were short. Both times were honest. We did not pretend that 18 years could be undone in a hospital room. But we did not pretend that nothing could ever be repaired either. My mother and I had 3 long phone calls in April. Painful ones. Real ones. The kind where neither person is performing. Where both people are just trying to tell the truth as clearly as they can without hurting each other more than necessary. She told me about the years after they left me at Mercy House. The guilt. The financial spiral that got worse before it got better. The way she had convinced herself that I was better off. The way she had stopped herself from calling 100 times because she didn't know what to say. I told her about the window. About the 14 stoplights. About the 4 months I went to the window every time a car pulled in. She was quiet for a long time after that. Then she said, "I am so sorry, Claire. I am so deeply, deeply sorry." I said, "I know." And I meant it. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, is not a feeling. It is a decision you make again and again on ordinary days. It is choosing not to let the wound be the loudest thing in the room. I was not all the way there yet, but I was walking toward it. With Marcus it was harder. The betrayal of the trust, knowing since 2021 and saying nothing, that took longer to sit with. We had 2 conversations in April that were difficult and 1 in May that was better. He told me that he had told himself it was not his place. That it was between me and our parents. That he had convinced himself, the way people convince themselves of things that make them feel less guilty, that I was doing fine, that I was obviously fine, that I didn't need the money. I said, "It was never about whether I needed the money, Marcus. It was about what Grandma Eleanor wanted. It was about the truth." He said, "I know. I was a coward." I said, "Yes, you were." He looked at me. "But you're my brother," I said. "And I'd like to try to build something from here. If you're willing to do the work." He said he was. I said, "Then let's see." It is September 2024 as I write this. I am 27 years old. I am in my 2nd year of my cardiothoracic surgical residency at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. My attendings tell me I have good hands, good instincts. I am told I have the specific kind of calm in the operating room that cannot be taught, only earned. I know where I earned it. I moved in August into a 2-bedroom apartment on the 18th floor of a building on West Erie Street. It has a view of the skyline I couldn't have imagined when I was sleeping on a futon on South Halsted. I have a proper bed now, a dining table, bookshelves that go to the ceiling. In the top drawer of my desk there are 2 things. The first is my grandmother's envelope. No. The letter inside is worn at the folds from being read so many times. I know every word of it by memory. But I read it anyway sometimes. Because some words need to be seen, not just remembered. The second is a photograph. It is from September 3rd, 2014. My 18th birthday. The day I left Mercy House. Miss Dorothy is in it, standing next to me in the parking lot. She is wearing her reading glasses on their chain and holding the edge of my blue suitcase like she's about to carry it for me, even though she knows she can't. I am 18 in that photograph. Finny. Nervous. Trying very hard to look braver than I feel. I keep it next to the letter. Because one is the beginning of what was taken from me. And the other is the beginning of who I became anyway. Miss Dorothy is 81 now. She still writes letters on actual stationery in blue ink. She still calls me on Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. Last month she told me that the young woman she'd given a peppermint candy to on a cold February afternoon had turned out exactly as she expected. I asked her what she had expected. She said, "Something extraordinary." Obviously. My father is recovering. He has made significant changes. Diet, medication, lifestyle. He called me last week to tell me he'd started cardiac rehab and that the therapist reminded him of me. He laughed a little when he said it. I laughed too. It was strange. Good strange. My mother and I have dinner once a month. The first few were hard. They're getting easier. Marcus and I text sometimes. Short things. Game scores. Articles. The small language of siblings who are relearning how to be siblings. It is slow. It is real. The trust, Grandma Eleanor's estate, is now the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation. A small scholarship fund I established in partnership with 3 community organizations in Rockford, Illinois. It supports young women aging out of foster care who are pursuing careers in medicine and science. This year the foundation gave out 4 scholarships. Each one is $12,000 renewable annually. Each recipient gets a handwritten letter from me. And at the bottom of every letter I write the same 4 words my grandmother wrote to me. Everything I have is yours. They left me on a Tuesday in February with a blue suitcase and a borrowed winter coat. They drove away believing that what they left behind was a problem they were walking away from. What they actually left behind was a surgeon. A foundation. A woman who learned, in the absence of everything a family is supposed to give you, how to give those things to herself. If you were left behind, if you know what it means to sit in a parking lot on your 18th birthday with everything you own in one bag and 0 people watching. If you were left behind and you built something anyway, drop it in the comments. We are listening. Every single one of us.